These are 5 of the most fascinating segments exploring conspiracy theories shared on the Joe Rogan Experience, from the use of psychic technology in space missions, unexpected family ties within the government, and even a hidden ancient civilization that reoccurs all around the world, questioning the entire origins of human existence. These are some of the craziest conspiracies from JRE Up. First, Joe Rogan explores a new bill the government is passing and how this bill could potentially be a threat to Americans. This is a very recent conversation from episode 2218 with Sam could potentially be a threat to Americans. This is a very recent conversation from episode 2218 with Sam Tripole.
Did you see this thing that the Biden administration pushed through, this new martial law thing?
Yeah.
This is very disturbing, giving the Pentagon power for the first time in history to use lethal force to kill Americans on U.S. soil who protest government policies.
What are they expecting?
That is a terrifying thing to push through for the first time in U.S. history, giving the military the ability to shoot and kill American citizens.
That's crazy, too.
The conspiracy,
too.
American citizens, and that's crazy, too. The conspiracy surrounding this bill is that the government passed it with an elaborate plan in mind. This plan being that the government creates artificial problems so that they can provide the people with a solution. These solutions being ones of control and forceful order. Whilst this law just passed recently, I did some intense digging and found Joe Rogan and Sam Tripole.
Through history, we've seen people who are profiled by agencies, Frank Sinatra, Martin Luther King, who weren't necessarily doing anything wrong, but they were being monitored. It's like you don't have to do something wrong to be monitored.
Well, that's the J. Edgar Hoover days. And before that, of course, the McCarthyism. But the McCarthy era is a classic example of people being persecuted and people being singled out and people being spied upon and categorized, these dangerous and divisive groups. That kind of behavior is unconstitutional for a reason.
Rogan dives into the possibility of false flag events and how the government uses these to get more control. Remember, this episode was over 11 years ago, and they will
create false flags, and through those false flags, these events will cause them to clamp down more on security.
Which
they will
is so
create
interesting,
problems.
right?
It's ridiculous, but it's true. They will create artificial problems so that they will have a solution. Create a problem, propose a solution, get what you want. What did you want? We wanted to be able to control people. We wanted an Orwellian society. How do we go about doing it? Well, we're going to have a threat, and you're going to have this threat. Let's call it terrorism. Terrorism is a good threat because it's so undefined. It's not like we conquer one nation and our terrorism problem is over. It continues forever.
This conspiracy theory just aren't paying attention. Instead, he claims that this is exactly what was happening even back then.
For people who think that's some tinfoil hat conspiracy bullshit, you're really not paying attention because it's happened. It's happened over and over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, even if you talk about conspiracy theories with some people, they can't even begin to understand it because they're looking at it through their point of view. And I mean, it's basic human behavior.
And if you can get it through the guise of war, it's really easy to get things done. And now they have mercenaries. I mean, during the Bush administration, they started using mercenaries for the first time in God knows how long, man. Openly using like Blackwater and all these other companies, go in and do a bunch of shit.
I met those dudes in Afghanistan.
I know some of those dudes.
They go on to say that the government doesn't care how many people die because constant conflict will make people forget we're a bunch of people.
Whether it's 100, 200, 3,000, 5,000, whatever, it doesn't matter in the bigger picture of everything.
Yeah, and they also know that time will continue to roll on, more conflicts will arise, and people will forget about it.
Constant state of war.
It seems like you're discussing an episode of the Joe Rogan Experience, specifically episode number 1299 with Annie Jacobson, where they talk about government experiments with psychics. Annie Jacobson is known for her investigative journalism, particularly in her book Phenomena, which explores the CIA's secret experiments with psychic phenomena. If you're interested in learning more about this topic or discussing the implications of such experiments, I'd be happy to dive deeper with you. What aspects of psychic experiments or government involvement interest you the most?
I talked to a lot of the scientists who taught the remote viewing, and I talked to a number of remote viewers for the book, but the most interesting of all was the astronaut Ed Mitchell, right? And he was so I'm interested in like the psychology behind what are you looking for in that. And I saw that I was doing some research in an archive, and I came across a photo of what turned out to be Ed Mitchell on the moon reading a piece of paper.
In the photo, he wasn't just casually looking at something. He was carefully studying a highly detailed map of the moon. But there's something even more fascinating. He had a serious interest in remote viewing, a mysterious ability to perceive distant or unseen targets using only the mind. As Annie Jacobsen is about to explain, he wasn't alone in his curiosity. Some of the greatest scientific minds of his time were secretly drawn to this strange phenomenon, and many of them were quietly working with classified government programs, exploring powers that seemed more like science fiction than reality.
Who wrote that map? Who's no one's even been here. Come on, man.
They had little maps folded up in their pockets in case they got lost. They were on the way to this crater, and in that crater they were going to find, allegedly, rocks that were going to solve the mystery of the moon's creation, the origin story, right? So they had like all this pressure. They couldn't find it. The heart rate's up. The guys at Houston are like, you got to turn back. Your heart rate's going crazy. And think about it. Mitchell tells me, I went to interview him at his house when I think it was his last interview before he died. And he said there we had gotten 240,000 miles to get lost. They missed the crater by 900 feet or something.
But here's where things turn weird. Despite Mitchell being fairly normal during his trip to the moon, on his trip back from the moon, everything changed. Specifically, Mitchell became convinced that physics powers were real, and not only that, he began to experiment with these supposed powers.
And on the way back from the moon, he has this, what he told me was a psychic change, right? His consciousness flipped, and he became convinced that psychic powers were real.
This wasn't the only experiment with psychic powers. Though Project Stargate was a secret government army unit that was established in 1977 to experiment with psychic powers, Jacobsen goes on to question how the government even has the power to run these experiments.
It's like, who's funding this stuff and why? And it really does come down to authority, which is always a narrative that I find fascinating, right? How do people get the authority to say go on these programs, or we should do that? I mean, the question you asked of who's in charge, right?
Right.
However, I have had people that work at Area 51 confirm parts of Bob's story. One in particular saw him coming off the jet, or he says he saw him coming off the Janet flights. I said, will you go on record with me that you met Bob there on the tarmac? No. Why? Everything we did there was confidential. We couldn't even tell our wives. Why would I go on record with you?
And if he did go on record, he'd probably get harassed.
They eventually told me that they had a live alien out there, that I could not go public with this until after he died, that they had craft, that it was in a special spot. Originally it was at Indian Springs, which is now Creech Air Force Base, and then it was moved to Area 51 when 51 became active, and that it was a very small group that tried to analyze this stuff. They didn't know where it was from. They didn't know how we obtained it. He said this thing was alive, and that they eventually were able to communicate with us, and told me that he was going to make a videotape and he was going to make it available so that after he died I could have it.
But then a few years later, the story completely changed.
What had happened was there was a congressional investigator. His name was Richard D'Amato, and he worked for Senator Robert Byrd, and he oversaw black budget projects, and he got onto this UFO story from Whitley Strieber, and so he was assigned, find out what the deal is. So he went around the country, talked to different researchers, and came to me and wanted to know about Area 51 and Lazar. So I told him a story, and I told him about this guy, and he got permission for this guy to violate his security oaths and talk to him about it. And they had multiple conversations, and they went to the founders of EG&G, the company, and it became a dead end. But after that congressional inquiry, this guy completely changed his tune. So he made up this story, which is the one that you heard from Annie Jacobsen, that what crashed at Roswell was a Russian technology, Nazi technology, flown by the Russians.
In episode 1314 of the Joe Rogan Experience, Joe sits down with Charlemagne the God and Andrew Schultz. At first, the conversation is all laughs. They're talking about celebrity endorsement deals, brand partnerships, and how money moves in Hollywood. But just when it seems like a casual chat, Charlemagne flips the script. he drops a wild conspiracy theory about Magic Johnson that instantly grabs everyone's attention. Joe leans in, curious, while Andrew throws in his sharp jokes. The room's energy shifts from playful to serious as they dive deep into questions about fame, media, and hidden agendas. It's one of those classic Rogan moments, unpredictable, funny, and thought-provoking all at once.
Some say the greatest endorsement deal Magic Johnson ever signed. I'm saying, we're not going to act like his career didn't flourish.
Bro, and he looks great. Take this AIDS, you go get some movie theaters.
I was in my car the day they announced on the radio that Magic Johnson had HIV, and I was shitting my pants. I was like, oh my God, this is like the beginning of a zombie movie. We're all going to get it.
He's on TV telling us why he left the motherfucking Lakers.
He's like, fuck the Lakers.
Not once did somebody say, yo, you know Magic got HIV?
Oh, I said it.
This how you... Shut up, no, you did.
That's all I was thinking about. Every time I see him. Because he looks incredible. He does look incredible.
He does look incredible.
Yeah.
He does look incredible.
He's not even positive in tests anymore.
Wait, what?
Here,
Charlemagne quickly presents his Magic Johnson conspiracy theory saying this.
Forgot what TV show I was on the set of, but he was explaining to me the whole situation with Magic. And he was like, the reason that they chose Magic was because they wanted to erase a lot of these stigmas. People thought that HIV and AIDS was a gay disease, and they needed like a alpha male, I guess, to have it, to kind of erase that stigma and to let people know that you can live with it. Like HIV,
You mean
AIDS.
like they gave it to him?
They said to me was Magic had got caught up in some type of scandal. And,
I heard this. Underage, right?
Yeah, and before the scandal came out, because the person that he was with was like
Allegedly.
some bigwig's child or something like that. And so they said, this is what you're going to do so we don't ruin you.
Still, Charlemagne argues that there are some pieces to the theory.
Right now, the first thing you're going to say to yourself is,
Give me Magic stock.
I can live through anything if Magic made it.
Real
Yeah.
talk.
You know what I'm
Magic's
saying?
fine. 30
That's
years
it.
later, he's okay. It's not a death sentence
That's
anymore.
it.